I think we're live. Yeah, cool. So this will just be a quick stream, just on to try something out. So previously, all of the levels in the game have all been set in the dungeon area. So like all of these rooms that we've been exporting, sorry, they've all been in the sewer area previously. So all these kind of green brick rooms are all the sewer stages, and you can see like zone type sewer. And what I'd like to do is bring in some of the other stages. So these are all like modules that you put together, with the idea being that it can procedurally and randomly stitch them into the actual level you're playing through. And we have multiple different types of room here. So we have like entrances, exits, the shop, the reward rooms. The majority of the dungeons are going to be passages like this, where we have rooms that all can connect and the doors can kind of attach at arbitrary points. The editor is quite cool here. It's just Blender with some plugins, but in theory at least, you can export any room by first exporting the meshes to make sure that it has copies of these meshes on the actual game data. You can export the room scene, that's the arrangement of all the objects, and then you can just hit play room. And of course, demo mode. It doesn't work when you try it, but pretty sure it works for the rooms down here at least. Yeah, so this one works. Let's see, I haven't set up the controller today, just use the keyboard today. So you can start in this little reward room and open up these chests, get some coins. But what I'd like to do is to also have support for the dungeon rooms. And before we actually had the sewer rooms, I did have a rooms.blend file which has quite a few different things in it. It's got some of these sewer rooms, but everything was just kind of in one blend file. It was still early days. We had some experimental rooms like this. They're kind of longer, just testing the kind of size and being able to instance or instantiate all these different meshes multiple times. But these also contain the actual starting area of the game, which is the dungeon rooms. It's just got a couple kind of early versions of it. So there's like chains on the ceiling and there's like straw strewn about everywhere. So that's kind of what I want to try getting into the game now. Now these haven't really been hooked up in any way though. So the first thing I'm going to try is I'm going to save this file as and call it dungeon rooms. So the other file was called sewer rooms, this one's dungeon rooms. Then I'm just going to go and delete everything that isn't a dungeon room. Which is, I mean, like pretty much everything. It's like just these rooms are dungeon rooms. I guess technically these are also like templates for dungeon rooms, so we could keep these too. And everything else pretty much can just go. Okay, and I'm gonna just pull in these over here so that they're all kind of together. Can't remember what these are. Oh, those are just the walls for those. Okay. Yeah, so I should have pulled the walls as well as the floors there. Then we'll just make this little divide a little bigger. There we go. I'll save that. So we've now got this dungeon rooms file. So next, let's just take one of these rooms and try and set it up as an entrance for the player. See if I can export it in all its glory. Try this room. It's a wee bit elaborate. Maybe a simpler one. I'll try this one. Now I may have started this already because I can actually see here that we have the parenting hierarchy set up. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on stream, but we have these lines going to the center of the room, which implies that it's in a parent hierarchy. So if I remove the floor, it moves the whole room. That's usually the first step in getting a room ready. So we've got that far. We don't have a nav mesh for it yet. All rooms need nav meshes. And I think, yeah, we haven't set up the object palette either, which is shared objects between all of the different zones. So the sewer and the dungeon can share object types. But this particular room here currently isn't pulling any of that in. So each of these objects is probably, oh no, they're instanced room to room just now. So if I change one, it'll change all of them. Honestly, for this test, that's probably fine. I can move them over to the object palette later as an optimization. But all I'm going to do just now is, first of all, if I just right click this, and I'm going to probably export these meshes to make sure they exist. Okay, so they've been exported. We'll export the room scene and then play the room. So immediately there's an error. Let's see what the problem is. In fact, I won't be able to see what the problem is here because that isn't actually hooked up to Visual Studio. But what I can do, I think, is hit Playroom and then attach to it from Visual Studio. If I can remember how. Attach to process. Here we go. And then I can grab HarleQuest if I can find it. There it is. Okay, so in theory my debugger is hooked up now, so when I load the level in, we get our error, and it'll now stop in the debugger. So let's see what this problem is. Can I see the output? Okay, so yeah, this assertion failed. It's a texture issue. Probably a texture that doesn't exist. It wants rockfloor.png inside shared dungeons. Rockfloor.png. So if I look in shared dungeons, yeah, there's no rock floor. So I'm assuming that was something that Ali added in under the final, or under the source assets in here. Textures. Yeah, there's rock floor right there. So it's probably massive. It's probably like, it looks high resolution at least. Yeah, 512 by 512 isn't too bad. That's probably would bring it down for the final game, but that'll be fine for now. So I can just put that in shared dungeons. I think it was just sitting here. Okay, and then we can try running the game, see if there's any other missing textures or missing assets. Yep, there's another error. This is the straw texture, straw.png. Just gonna grab some water. Yeah, so straw.png needs to be added in as well. That'll hopefully be in textures. Yeah, straw.png. And similarly, that's probably, that one's 256 by 256. That's a bit smaller. I mean, again, this will definitely be scrunched down for the final game because I think the straw isn't very big. So this process is not very common for me to have to do this. It's usually if I bring in a new zone type, and there's only going to be maybe 5 zones in the game. Okay, so this time the game did run. It didn't load in the level that I wanted, but that's correct actually based on what I told it to do because I was running it from Visual Studio. If instead I run it from Blender, I wonder. No, it's still just loading the default room, which means for some reason it was unable to export all of this. So export selected meshes, room scene, playroom. Yeah, that's still not loading. Okay, so I'll have to dig into this a little bit. we do have the data. We do have the data exported. Can have a little look to make sure. So under final, shared, exported, not armatures, meshes. Got a bunch of meshes. The ones we really care about right now are dungeon. So we have an entrance folder for dungeon, but we don't actually have any entrances as such. And then here's our dungeon floor 1x1 003.scene, which I think is this thing. Now a possibility here is that it can't find our file because it's looking for sewer stuff when it launches the executable of the game. So what I can do is try to tell it what thing to load. Here we are, so there's a dash room command line argument. And then when I do that, it'll set debug room to load. And then when we call game screen reload, it will actually generate the initial floor from that debug room. So we'll look everywhere that we use that. Here we go, so we look to see if the root name of the scene matches the debug room to load. So if I was to put a breakpoint in here and run the game, it should tell me if, first of all, if I'm trying to do that, and secondly, whether it's found the room. So right now I'm not trying to do it at all, so it just loads up the default entrance in the sewer. If I jump over to the project settings and just specify command line argument to say room and then the name of the room, in this case I want to grab it from Blender. This is dungeon floor 1x1. Dungeon floor 1x1, and then if I hit play, that should hopefully, there we are. Yeah, so it's found the fact that I have a debug room that I want to load, and it's called dungeon floor 1x1. Now it's scanning through the scenes, the room scenes that it has, to see if there's one that matches. So if I look at these room scenes, they're broken down by category. So this is for each category. And a category would be like an entrance or a passage or a hub or something. So each room has its own category. Just now, it is currently looking in, can I find out, entrances. So it's looking through all the entrances first. So if I put a breakpoint here, it'll only hit that breakpoint if it finds something matching this dungeon floor 1x1, and then here will be afterwards. So if I just get rid of this breakpoint and hit play, okay, so it never finds it. That's not that surprising. So the problem is that when we're loading room scenes by category, it's never actually putting it in the room scenes by category when it loads. Okay, so in the game screen, this is where we would do this. We go through all of our zones, and for each one, we're trying to load stuff by listing folder contents. So what I'm going to do just now is, just with a breakpoint here, jump in and see what it's actually trying to load in. So to begin with, we have scenes to load. There's no scenes to load inside the exported scenes dungeon entrance folder. I think I know what this might be. It's that we're always looking under the category, so we expect the room to have a category of some kind. But the room that we had in here, I've not given it a category, I've given it a zone. I've not said that it's an entrance or anything else. And the way, now from memory, I think the way we specify categories is purely with the name. So, for example, this entrance has entrance_1. So if I was to rename this, now is it the object? I think it's the object instead of the mesh as well, so that's a different thing. Yeah, it's the object is entrance 1, so, and it has to be the root object for the room. So I can just call this one entrance 1 as well. And then I'm just going to save that. And I'm going to do my re-exports. It's a little bit superstitious to always re-export meshes. Don't really need to do it, but it's fast enough. Export room scene, playroom. Okay, so it's still not in there, but that's okay. Yeah, what I'd really like is to see why that is. Let's find out why. Okay, so again, we are, right, so this is when we're loading, we're going through our category mappings. We're currently looking under dungeon entrance, and this time it finds something. It's going to put it into the entrance category, and it's going to load the scene. So at least it's able to load the scene when I do this now. Dungeon entrance 1.scene. And if I hit play, and now we're into Dungeon Hub, but again, it's not going to find any other things for dungeon. And then the next ones will probably be a sewer. Yeah, so it's into the sewer stuff now. So now, based on the room name, I give it scene name and then strip out the extension, like the .scene extension. So that means for debugging, I actually need to specify not dungeon floor 1x1, but dungeon entrance 1. I wonder if this is going to work. No, we're still pulling that same room. Okay. Okay. It's all right so far, and it is loading the data in, so it exists in the room scenes by category. No, didn't before. So I guess all we have to do now is figure out why it's not loading our debug room. Which again, it might be because we're just in the sewer biome and we need to be in the dungeon biome. Or I say biome zone, yeah. Okay, so in here, this is where we'd search for it. This is where we'd go if we found it. Now we're going by category for, yeah, I have a suspicion that this is just because we're in the wrong zone. Like if I look at the zone types in here. Oh no, in here. So we're going through all these zone types. So if I wanted to grab the zone type dungeon, oh, we'll probably search for sewer. Let's see if, yeah, here we go. Support a floor type that isn't just sewer. That's definitely a thing. And game screen does the same. So if I was to just change these just now to dungeon. There we go. Awesome. Okay, so one of the textures is wrong, is the first thing I notice. The floor texture isn't using the rock floor, it's using the sewer floor. And my guess is maybe it's using the same name or something. I'm not sure, I'll have to look into why that is. It's possibly even pulling the wrong mesh, that's a strong possibility. Yeah, so we're in this room. There's no nav mesh, so I can just walk through things. There's nowhere for the doors to go yet, so you can't operate them. Because this is the only dungeon room that we've got so far. But it's kind of worked, like you can see that the these little cells exist, the chains have loaded in, the piles of straw have loaded in. We've got the barrels, they'll be from the object palette later. Yeah, looking pretty good. Okay. So I think, yeah, the reason this will have selected the wrong mesh is probably because previously we were exporting meshes to, or we still are exporting meshes all to the same folder. So in final, shared, exported meshes, there's a whole bunch of meshes here, and some of them are codenamed like sewer underscore, but those have been manually named inside the file. Same as the ones with dungeon. Like, I haven't added any special feature that adds the zone type to the beginning of the mesh or anything. So some of these could, for example, if there is a floor mesh, can't see one, I could maybe do a search for it. So we have, I mean, not really, we do have sewer floor mesh, and we have dungeon floor mesh. So that doesn't really explain why the textures are different there. It's a strange one. Let's look at this floor then. So object is called entrance 1. The mesh is dungeon floor 1x1. And when we load that in, it should be loading a texture rockfloor.png. And we know that rockfloor.png definitely exists. I wonder if it's loading something in addition to the rock floor. If I delete the rock floor, well, I can't because it's the root, but I could maybe scale its mesh data right down. Do we still see a sewer floor like underneath it? I wonder if this works now too. Yeah, alright, so we still see the sewer floor. So actually the sewer floor is, it's just being added in from somewhere else somehow. Something else is pulling in the sewer floor. I don't know if maybe our room and dungeon generator is splicing a room on or something. It's a little weird. Let's see. Just to make sure that the updates are actually coming through when I do that, if I like move this to here and then like create a bunch of them just to make it really obvious that the changes come through, and then we can export the room scene. I mean, it looks like everything's underneath the floor, so I kind of know. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that isn't showing up now that I look at it. We get the chains, we're not getting certain objects. There's one instance of the straw when it feels like there should be more. So yeah, something's a little unusual here. So, okay, we can see straw. You know, the small straw and the big straw are different objects, and I feel like maybe these straw piles are... Like, that's one big one. Straw pile small is a different mesh. Is it just straw pile small that isn't there? Looks like it. So if I grab the big one and move it over here, yeah, there we go. So the big one works fine, but the small one doesn't. So that in itself is interesting. So small, and these are all different copies. They all point to straw, pile small to mesh. And this one is also called, it's also pointing to that one, but it's slightly bigger, but that'll be why none of those are showing. If I go export selected meshes, and then we'll have a look at the actual data in here. So exported meshes, and there should be one called straw pile small. There is. So the mesh exists, at least. For some reason the game isn't loading it or at least it isn't rendering it. Yeah, and it's rendering this floor. Now, it's always a possibility that they're underneath the floor, but I don't think so. I think they would poke up through the floor. Just to be sure though, I don't know, they are actually very flat now that I look at them. So if I just take this one up here, I need to re-export my room scene. Yeah, that's it. They're just so flat that they're underneath the floor, so it is actually exporting them. That's good, at least there isn't a pipeline issue there. Just for some reason it's adding a floor that shouldn't exist. It makes me wonder if I was to move the mesh data for this floor up, and then try that. Yeah, that floor does exist too, so it really is just that there's this extra floor. Everything else is working fine. Cool, okay, so let's figure out why that sewer floor is also getting loaded in. There's no special logic for that, so it must be something like, my guess is that it's selecting the wrong mesh, that it goes through to try to select a root mesh for that room, and it selects the wrong one and then renders that. Easy way to find out would be oh, I also just want to check in Blender that it isn't there but on another layer. No, that's fine. And if we look in the outliner, just make sure there aren't any secrets. That's our actual floor. There's nothing else in this room. Wait, sewer floor 1-1 nav mesh? What's this? What is this? It thinks it's a nav mesh. This definitely isn't a sewer, so it's got confused. This could be it. I don't know why it isn't showing in Blender. Delete that. Maybe just some leftover data from the way this room was made. Yeah, that was it. Just some leftover data in the file. Perfect. That's the kind of bug I like. Not a code problem. Sweet, okay, so this shouldn't be too bad then. So we should be able to take these straw piles and delete those, and then this mesh needs to go back down to 0. So put that back on the floor, and then I want to scale it back up again. So like, probably the easiest way is just to do it this way. I'm gonna make it like probably around there. There we go. Cool, so then again, just going to re-export the meshes, play the room. There we are. Awesome. It's actually starting to look like a level. Okay, so again, there's no nav mesh yet, but that is a very good start. Now what I would like to do at some point is update my actual code so it understands that it can jump between these different zones. It's not just restricted to one hard-coded zone at a time. I think I'll do that in a future stream though, but for this stream we will just wrap up by adding a nav mesh, I think. Just to do that so that the player's movement is restricted. So there's a few things we could do. I think probably the best way to get started is to just add a plane. That's going to be all the way up there, so I should have added that in the room, but that's fine. Move it down. Okay, and then we're going to just move this to 0 on Z. I'm just going to move it up slightly so it's not Z fighting, so we can see what it's doing. I'm going to parent that to the floor. So when you move the floor, it moves that. Now what I'm going to do is, if I apply the parent inverse, the stats we have here are going to be relative to the actual room root. So we can go 0, 0, 0, and it'll be centered in here. Again, I want it to be slightly above because it's Z fighting. And then I just want to scale it out to broadly the size of the room. And then if it's a nav mesh, the way that nav meshes work in this engine is that you paint them. So if I go into vertex paint mode, I can paint this a shade of green. And green means walkable. So we can get like a walkable area. And I want to make the radius bigger for my brush here. And just paint on the corners of the mesh. And that'll all be a walkable area. And then what I do by convention is name it nav mesh for a start. So dungeon, it'd be entrance 1, right? Entrance 1 nav mesh. And then object wise, I'll do the same. Now, did I select the right object there? I think I maybe just messed that up. The thing that should be colored in. Hold on. Let's see what I've done here. I may have added this plane while I was in edit mode. Let's see. No, that's fine. It is a separate mesh. That's fine, cool. See this, it's called plane 31, so we're going to call it entrance 1 nav mesh. And the object, entrance 1 nav mesh. Nice. So now we can go back over to our ambition tools. Ambition is the working title for the game engine, but it's because it begins with A. It's easy to see the list. So then we will set floors nav mesh, export the mesh, play the room. Oh no, errors. Okay, so something went wrong with that. Did I miss anything out? Let's go back over to... Oh, I did actually. I think I didn't re-export everything. So obviously need to re-export the meshes, but also the room scene. No, it's still an error. Okay, well in that case, I can just run it in Visual Studio. Hopefully it'll tell me what the problem is. Missing texture? Ha, there's something in here without a texture. Oh, the nav mesh doesn't have a texture. Did I not tell it was a nav mesh? Did I skip that step? No, I did tell it was a nav mesh. It knows it is. If it knows it's a nav mesh, it shouldn't try to load a texture for it. Oh, I remember why. It has to begin with nav. Forgot about that convention. I think it was nav. I'm going to just jump over to the sewer scenes. Check the nav meshes here. Yeah, nav entrance 1 is what we called it for the sewer. And did I re-export the mesh? And the room. Yeah, okay, so there's some other issue. I think some other issue. We'll see. No, it's still a no texture issue, so it's still trying to load something that doesn't have a texture, and it's in dungeons no texture.png is where it's looking. I guess what I could do is if I look at the stack trace, it'll tell me which particular mesh it can't load. Let's see, load texture, mesh load from file. Entrance 1 nav mesh. Okay, so it still has the entrance 1 nav mesh file lying around from when I exported it last time. That's all it is. Entrance 1 nav mesh.mesh. So if I delete that, we still have the actual nav mesh. Now we might have some issues here because yes, it begins with nav, but it also is going to conflict with the one in the sewer. That's a bug that I'm going to fix next time. Let's see if it loaded the right one. Looks good so far. So now I can't move past the confines of this room. There is a bug with the nav meshes where in some corners it can warp you, and I don't know why. I think it's something to do with, it's either a code for finding the nearest point on a polygon, or it is the winding order of some of the vertices. I believe it's the top left corner does the same thing, yeah. So this, it's actually hard to say which nav mesh this is loading. Easy way to find out would be to jump over to this nav mesh and just make a change. So if we cut it up like, in fact that's not even necessary really, you could just do it like this and make it so that the player can't walk on one of these faces. Like that, and then we export the mesh, room scene, play the room. Walk up there, can we walk up here? No, okay, so it's definitely using the right file to the point where I created that, but it still has this problem with, I don't know, the warping seems to have lessened, so I don't know what that means exactly. It might be a kind of, it's almost like a floating point precision issue. Gut feeling anyway. Yeah, I can come back to that. Top right still has that issue. It's almost like because this edge is not as long now, it's almost like it's a percentage along that edge. Maybe not specifically a floating point rounding issue, but it's like a percentage along that edge. If it was along the full edge, it jumped to like higher, like up here, and then when I like took away 1/3 of the length of that edge, now it kind of skips down here. So I can look into that later. But I'm pretty happy with that. I think we're able to pull in a completely new area that we've not seen before in the game, and it's highlighted a few issues that I can look into next time. And okay, that is all for today's stream. See you later.